Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In the last video we learned how to make lists and we learned how to work with every single item in a list. In this video we're going to kick it up a notch and we are going to learn how to loop through lists, which is going to allow us to use a few lines of code to iterate through the entire list and do something with it. If you're ready for this video, make sure to drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out the description for the links to my socials. Well, let's get started. Moving through a list is very practical and very important. For example, when you're making a game, you might want to perform the same operation on every single element. You might need to loop through a list containing all those items and maybe change their x by 1, for example. So let's say we have 3 programming languages in a list. We created a list last video, but we're just going to reduce the number of programming languages to 3. And let's say we want to print every single item in the list. Of course, you can use the normal method, which is print in the first index, second index, and third index. But that is going to take up a lot of lines, and there is just a way to make it shorter, and that is using loops. That's what we're talking about in this video. So the first type of loop we'll be using is the for loop. So let's say we want to print every single programming languages in the list. We are going to use a for loop. We're going to use for programming language in programming languages. I'm going to explain this all, but for now this is going to be for programming language in programming languages. We are going to print the programming language. Now here we do not have a variable called programming language, but we're telling Python in the loop to associate it with the variable programming language. And then once you associate the current index with the variable, you can then print the variable. But Python will realize that the list is not yet over. There is still another item in the list. So what does Python do? It goes back to the first line of the loop and moves on to the next item. So it's going to print that out too. So when you use this loop, it's going to print out every single item in the list. Now this is great, especially if you have larger lists. You can just print them all out. That's going to be way easier than having to print every single one of them. So one reminder I'd like to give right here is choosing the name of the variable that you're going to associate your list with. It's important to do something related to the variable. For example, for programming language in programming languages, for name in names. This can help you to follow the action being done in the loop, and it's just going to make your code way easier and way more readable. But anyways, let's move on to the next point. A loop is not just for printing items. You can do almost anything with a loop, because when you retrieve the item in the list, you can do anything with it. You can modify it. You can print the capital version using the upper method. You can do anything. So of course we can use it in a string. For example, we can print programming language is a great programming language, right? But that programming language is going to be the name of the programming language, not the variable. So when we print that, we can use the .title method too right here, and we are going to print the programming language at this point. And then also we can use f strings to embed it right into the string and then add the other text. That is going to make it a lot easier. So now it's going to print every single item in the list and say it's a great programming language. You can do as many as you want. You can also use conditional statements to change the sentence that will be printed, or you can also use a random chance and print any random message that your IDLE pulls out of a list. So let's say you want to add another line. I want to learn this programming language. All you need to do is put it in a new line. I want to learn, and then programming language, and you can print them side by side. Python is a great programming language. I want to learn Python, and so on. So you can use as many lines as you want in your loops. Just a great reminder to show you that you're free to do anything inside that loop. When the loop is done executing, it continues reading down the code. Python reads code from top to bottom. So when it comes across a loop, it loops through every single item in the list, and then it continues with the code. So any lines of code after the loop will be executed once and they won't be repeated. So at the end of the loop, we can write something like those are great programming languages. When you do that, it's going to first go through the entire loop and then print that statement. So it's only going to print it at the end of the loop. So loops are used a lot in Python, so practice using it now because it's going to make your coding easier in the long run. But think about it, loops also have their own errors. You might get errors while working with loops, and most of these might be indentation errors. Now, if you don't know already, Python uses indents to determine how a line or group of lines are related in a program. So depending on where you place your code, how much spacing there is, Python is going to treat it as its own block of code, and that is how it makes the difference. Instead of using semicolons at the end of the line, Python uses indentation. But sometimes you might get errors in it. For example, if you don't indent your code at all, it's going to cause an error. It's going to tell you it expected an indented block. So what you have to do is go to start the code and press tab or add 4 spaces. That is going to indent the code for you. So normally it's 4 spaces. You can reduce it or increase it, but don't forget to indent and put them all on the same line. This also goes for multiple lines. When you have multiple lines in a loop, you should indent all the lines in the loop, or else it's not going to execute until the loop is done, which you don't want to happen. You want it to execute every single time the loop is executed. Another thing you might need to know is unnecessary indents. Sometimes you don't need to indent code. It's not under a function, it's not under a loop, not under a conditional statement. When you do that, it's going to throw an error. All you have to do is remove that space before the code. You can avoid this by indenting only when you need to. For example, for loops, conditional statements, and functions. Video, check out the description for the links to my socials, and practice the skills that you learn from these tutorials so that you can get better at Python. Anyways guys, keep on practicing, stay happy coding, and I'll see you in the next video.